It's basically when you say, when somebody, it's worse. The worst if is if it happens in families, but it's basically you are, for example, highly sensitive, and you feel certain things, or you sorry, it's kind of cold outside. You feel certain things, and you you experience the world in a certain way, and then other people will tell you it's not true what you're feeling, or it's not true what you're thinking, and they basically discount. It's a form of toxic metaframing. They discount what you're saying. So you might say, for example, uh what you just said hurts me, and the other person will say, well, don't be so sensitive. It's a discounting, basically. It's or you will say, just 4 days ago, what you said uh was horrible, and the person will say, like, what did I say? And if you can't remember, and and that's where, as one person put it, this is where you need to be very careful. And but if you recognize toxic metaframing, then gaslighting usually is not far away, especially if toxic metaframing is continuous. If toxic metaframing is continuous, then gaslighting is usually right around the corner. So so if you understand toxic metaframing, then and you avoid toxic metaframing with how I say you should avoid it, then you will probably also avoid the gaslighters. And where does actually toxic metaframing and gaslighting come from? It's actually a solar plexus blockage, because the person that is toxic metaframing and gaslighting, they want absolute control of the environment. And this is something which is opposite to spiritual awakening and spiritual growth. Spiritual growth is about letting go and acceptance. A person who needs to control the environment and gets extremely dissatisfied when they can't control their environment, which is a solar plexus blockage, they basically start to intend to control people. And if they see that people are not controllable, they'll use tactics to control them, psychological tactics. So basically, a narcissist, a toxic metaframer, a gaslighter is someone who has a deep seated insecurity about not being able to control their environment. And they're afraid also of being alone. They're afraid to not have a sparing partner for their mind, for their ego. You could almost say it's a pain body. Like Eckhart Tolle uses the word pain body. It's a pain body that needs a sparing partner, but not on the loving side. Is basically a pain body wants to keep active by creating more pain, or by creating more pain. So because there's an underlying trauma that hasn't been released yet, obviously. So when you have someone who has a pain body that Venus is attached to that pain body, they're going to create problems and try to control the narrative in order to regularly be able um, to to trigger the pain body. Basically, I noticed with narcissists, the worst thing for narcissists is being alone, and that's why you need to give them the medicine. So the medicine of being alone, but don't expect that they change. It's just, if you want to do something good for yourself and for the narcissist, just leave them. That's the very best, because that's the only time they will start to reflect, interestingly enough. But the problem is, a lot of people are, I'll just get into the comments right away. A lot of people are enjoying this kind of pain body experience, so that's how they end up in codependency relationships. And the thing is, a lot of people are like this. That means the narcissist, especially the narcissist that is either very feminine or masculine, they will immediately find someone else to be victim, which is very interesting. When I was growing up, my mother would repeatedly gaslight me even before I knew that what the term was. Thankfully, these days I can deal with it much better when people do it to me. The pain body is one of the most practically useful spiritual concepts out there. Yes, absolutely. So when your mother was gaslighting you, uh, these I can deal with it much better when people do it to me, and you've grown from it. You immediately recognize it, of course. But before it gaslighting comes, usually toxic metaframing comes. So when you recognize toxic metaframing, you're already preventing the gaslighting that's gonna come later. Understanding the concept of pain body makes human behavior so much easier to understand. Yes, uh, pain body, absolutely. That was a genius stroke from Eckhart Tolle. The pain body is basically, let me see if I can put it well into words, how I would explain where the pain body comes from. The pain body is the fear. You know where the pain body comes from? It's the fear to face all traumas, because you're suppressing the trauma, and thereby the actual pain of the trauma is creating your thought environment and an acting environment. So basically, if um let me see. Um I'm so fearful to experience love, and I'm because I might get hurt, that I prefer to experience the pain body, which is not as bad as the time that I got hurt when somebody hurt me, physically or emotionally. So you're basically trying to make a compromise to a lower form of pain body. Um, you're basically so afraid to experience some certain emotion that you are compromising with a lower intense, um, unsatisfying emotion, rather than experiencing the brutal emotion that you once had. So the higher that kind of toxicity was, and the more you're probably going to be in the pain body. The thing is also has to do with consciousness, because the more self-reflective and conscious you are, the more you are going to resolve and see through these behaviors. And so I would recommend for anybody who has a feeling that they're being gaslighted or that they have been gaslighted is learn about toxic metaframing, because when you understand toxic metaframing, you'll completely avoid the gaslighter. It's absolutely fantastic, and you see those subtleties over time, which is super important. Because if you see the subtleties, you are not going to get sucked into an narcissist, expert narcissist. An expert narcissist, you cannot, you know, I have an analogy with the expert narcissist. If you're a normal chess player and you play against a grandmaster, you have absolutely no chance. Like whatever move you do, they're gonna outplay you. Like whatever move you do, they're gonna outplay you, even if you are being given an advantage in the beginning. Do you have absolutely no chance? And this is the same with an expert narcissist. They have been training 10, 20, 30 years to play with people, to manipulate them very subtly, very, very subtly. And by the way, there was a video of, I watched the video fully where Putin and Tucker Carlson had an interview. I actually should do a reaction video on that. Maybe I'll do this. Um, and Putin is a massive toxic metaframer, and he started the interview right away with a toxic metaframe, which tells you that Putin is a toxic person. You don't even need to know more than that. I'm not saying, I'm not making this political, because 80 to 90% of people are toxic metaframers, but he was very obviously toxic metaframing in the public. I actually, this is something interesting, is by Tucker Carlson staying in the interview, not standing up and going away. Which, Putin could kill him, so yeah, it's very hard, to do that. But by keep sitting there in the interview and not standing up and going away after he's been toxic meta framed is actually uh, the self hatred. It's not self love. So I would have in the interview, if somebody would toxic meta frame me like that right from the start, I would get up and get out. See, most people are afraid of the consequences because they're afraid. There's fear behind it. What happens if I bodge the interview that I planned so long? What happens if I lose my viewership? What happens if I don't earn as much? What happens if I don't get as popular? All these are fears, and these fears are what's holding you back. And the only way to realize that you are not the fear is by awakening to the self and realizing you are not the fear, you're just observing the fear, and to beingness, nothing can happen. And the moment that you understand that, you can walk away from these things. Otherwise, you're always led by fear or the pain body. Um, yeah, Neil is tired. Okay. So spiritual awakening is your best bet on recognizing all of these patterns and understanding toxic metaframing, and then you completely avoid gaslighting. And gaslighting can come in many forms. It's but it's usually verbal, and it's usually about protecting the narcissist in the sense that the victim shouldn't recognize that they're toxic. It's like that's like once you question the because if you don't know toxic metaframing and you feel like something is off, you can't really put like words to it, so you feel something is off, and you start questioning that, your intuitive feeling, and then I mean, isn't it stupid? Think about it. Isn't it stupid to ask the narcissist about their misbehavior? It's like if they're unconscious, and most people are unconscious of what they're doing. If they're unconscious, how could they agree with you? It's like it's not in their interest. So um especially for a narcissist, not in their interest to agree with you. So the very worst form, the worst toxic metaframing is if somebody feels the other person shouldn't even exist and they kill them, or they attempt to kill them, or they put them in some kind of confinement or whatever. That's the worst form of toxic metaframing. I mean, but there's many, but that's the worst one. The most subtle is like looking at someone like this, like, who are you, but let's assume that you are in an open air prison, right? And you've been put there just because of your race, let's say, or you're belonging to a religion, okay? And you're on the side of of the prison, okay? And then there's the guard. And you're like, "Hey, why did you put me here?" And they will use any kind of excuse to why they put you there. It's a very good analogy, actually. And they will use any kind of excuse why they put you there, and if they do it well, you will be like, you will get what you want to get out, but you stay in there, and um and they will try in their mind to justify why they put you there in order to not feel bad about it. And so they cannot, an unconscious person cannot accept their bad behavior side. They cannot accept, for example, I know a narcissist who truly believes he's a real narcissist, and he truly believes he's a good person. This is absolutely amazing. And then the interesting thing is when you say, for example, uh, I don't like people that much, for example, you say, and the other person says, well, then something is wrong with you. No, nothing is wrong with you. If you, there's some people that like people, some people that don't like people, there's nothing wrong. This is the type of gaslighting and manipulating tactics. And it's very, very strange if it happens with friends or family because you're not expecting it. Like you expect these people to to stand for you, but they're not. Putin told Tucker Carlson, referring to Tucker trying to join the CIA, and you said, maybe we should thank God they didn't let you in, although it's a serious organization, I understand. Yes, but there was already other toxic matter frames before that. The first toxic matter frame right from the start was when he said, is this a serious interview or is this entertainment? And Tucker was like, what the fuck? And that was a clear toxic meta framing because it's obvious that it's supposed to be a serious interview, or it, Putin decides how serious it is. So just the question alone, is it a serious interview or is it, yeah, entertainment, is a toxic meta frame to Tucker Carlson. It's basically saying, is this like, are you gonna be a journalist or what? You know. So, and of course, Putin knows how Tucker Carlson does his interviews, so the question is absolutely redundant. It's just to put him into his place, basically, in a toxic meta framing way. So we could talk about this in another video, but that's definitely so. And the thing is about, about someone who's toxic meta framing is they are a toxic person. So I've never seen or heard Tucker Carlson toxic metaframe anyone. He could have even said, if there's, like I said, there's three possibilities when a toxic metaframes you. Let's take the Tucker Carlson Putin situation. So Tucker Carlson did a codependency victim mentality reaction. He said it's a serious interview and stayed in the interview. The other two options is to stand up and go away. Be like, okay, have a nice day. I don't need this shit, kind of like. And the third option is over toxic metaframe him, which with Putin is very dangerous because you're basically saying, I want to be killed. Is if you said, for example, well, are you serious, president? Because you're kind of short. Something like this. God, you would be dead by the end of the day, I'm telling you. So, uh, but these are the three options. You can decide which three options to take. Tucker Carlson took the victim mentality approach. I mean, the thing is that if you suck it up like he did, and you still do the interview, you actually undermine your self worth and your self love, and it's very hard to repair if you keep doing it. Um, I mean, he had to assess at that point what is the smartest thing to do, and probably it was the smartest thing because if he gets up or if he over toxic metaframes, Putin is gonna probably get rid of Tucker. So there's a lot of ways, mm, poisoning and shit, whatever. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. But very interesting stuff. Maybe I'll make a reaction video on the interview.